Hot air balloon that could go to space with the air like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got, and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, evening to folks joining us from other parts of the world. Thank you for joining today's Customer Data Summit North America, brought to you by Lemnisk. I'm Subra Krishnan, CEO of Lemnisk. Lemnisk, a quick word about Lemnisk. Lemnisk's customer data platform-led personalization and marketing automation solution delivers superior customer experiences that result in better conversions, better retention, and growth for enterprises. The key capabilities include the ability to uniquely stitch a user in real time across different data sources and channels, create one-to-one machine learning driven hyper-personalized experiences for each user across multiple marketing channels. We also offer a managed CDP offering where we bring not just a world-class product, but agile implementation and operations expertise as well. We have offices in Boston, Singapore, Bangalore, and Dubai. Lemnisk is ISO 27001 and ISO 27018 certified. For more information, visit www.lemnisk.co. That's lemnisk.co. You can also email us at marketing@lemnisk.co if you're looking for CDP-driven marketing automation or personalization this year. Right. Today's Customer Data Summit is actually the fourth in a series of virtual conferences that we planned across the globe. Earlier through the year, we held events in Southeast Asia, Middle East, India regions. We have a very, very exciting session planned today as well. So we put together this event focused on data-driven marketing, mainly because we are seeing a strong trend in the North American region among marketers who are starting to understand and leverage the power of their customer data. It's also fair to say that as we slowly heal from the scars of COVID-19, being data and digital savvy is no longer a trend, but almost a survival mandate. The speakers today represent some of the sharpest minds in the region who are at the forefront of this trend and are experts at harnessing data to transform their businesses. As a digital marketing enthusiast, I'm really, really looking forward to it. So what can you expect? I'll just give you a quick rundown of the series of sessions that we're going to do today. And then without further ado, we'll get started. So we'll kick off today's summit with a keynote from Gaurav Bhatia, Chief Marketing Officer at PenFed Credit Union. In his keynote, Gaurav will explore the underlying themes driving the need for this summit, namely the start of a new decade and the first year post-pandemic, the acceleration of digital, and he'll also talk about the frameworks marketers could use to operate in this new decade. We have given time for Q&A too after his presentation. So if you folks have any questions, just keep them ready. And after his session is over, we'll do a Q&A as well. After Gaurav's keynote, I will sit down with David Raab for a fireside chat. David, of course, needs no introduction in the Martech space. As founder of the CDP Institute, his work in the CDP space has been seminal for global marketers to understand this category. It's going to be a fun session where we actually grill David on his predictions for 2021 that he made last year. I mean, making predictions in any year, I would say, is fraught with pitfalls. Making one at the peak of the 2020 pandemic was practically like jumping off a steep cliff. So let's see how David did there. The last session for this morning will feature a panel titled The Rise of the Super Intelligent Marketer. Tim Steele, SVP US Sales and Ops at Lemnisk, will speak with Carol Ferrari, Vice President of Product Marketing at Salary.com, and Hazem Abu Ghazaleh, Partner and Chief Operating Officer at Y Brand Tech, about modern marketing ideas and principles, and give you some terrific insights on how to extract and leverage data to drive business outcomes. So there you have it. We will stay on time. We don't expect delays beyond a few minutes. We appreciate everyone's time here, so we will keep it strictly on schedule. So grab your popcorn and stay glued to the sessions. I will get the keynote introduced now. So without further ado, let me now invite Gaurav Bhatia. At Penn, Gaurav is the Chief Marketing Officer and Digital Experience Officer at PenFed Credit Union. In his current role, he's responsible for the growth, marketing strategy and execution, and digital experience for PenFed across all channels, digital and traditional. Under his leadership, PenFed's marketing team is continuing to invest in state-of-the-art marketing tech stacks, such as building a data warehouse, growing PenFed's member relations management, maximizing the capabilities of tools like Adobe and Salesforce, and leveraging data to personalize their marketing. Forward thinking, creativity, and willingness to take thoughtful, measured risks to drive outcomes are the qualities that have made Gaurav Bhatia a renowned leader today. He's adept at anticipating future challenges and pivoting to meet unexpected challenges like the ones we've been having. He also understands the rapid changes within the industry. Gaurav's experience enables him to drive revenue while being a respected and compassionate leader. Prior to PenFed, he worked as the Chief Digital Officer at New Day USA and as the Vice President of Digital Strategy at AARP. He has also had senior leadership roles in companies such as NIIT, Capital One, and Sabre. Gaurav, we're so thrilled to have you deliver the Lemnisk Customer Data Platform Summit keynote this morning. Without further ado, Gaurav, the stage is all yours.
And thank you, Subra, for the kind introduction. I didn't realize that we, as a team, has accomplished so much. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about is basically the view from a business standpoint and really about how marketing has evolved in the last decade. My background, like Subra was very kind enough, I've had different roles in different organizations. Some were product, some were technology, some was strategy, but eventually now lead PenFed. It's a $28 billion financial institution, 2.3 million members based in McLean, Virginia. So if you don't mind, Joy, next slide, please. So this is kind of how I view the changes in marketing over the last 10 years. When I started my journey, I mean, people who've been in the industry, I said 15, 20 years, they probably remember it. Marketing was only about advertising. So you put an ad on television and direct mail, you get your leads, and that's about it. Over the last 5 or 7 years, that's probably about 8 years, it's really kind of morphed to more about direct marketing and really something we call performance marketing, which could be Google paid search. And the digital capabilities have evolved over time. So now we have the web, we have the email, we have the mobile app. And what people really kind of did was really they took all their traditional marketing and applied onto the internet and said, okay, yeah, now instead of reaching over television, now let's just do advertising over the internet. And that was basically about from 2012 to about 2018. And then over the last 5 years, with all the technology, the Martech stack evolving, we really have become very sophisticated. And the end-to-end marketing has really become the focus on brands. Because if you are running marketing or you're running a leadership position in your organization, your CFO and CEO are really going to ask you, hey, I'm giving you X million dollars. Where's my ROI? And what's my cost per acquisition? What revenue can you generate? So I have a fundamental belief that marketers have become more growth leaders and they really have become revenue drivers. And to really make sense of it all, they really need to understand data, they really need to use data, and they really need to talk the language in terms of technology and experiences. What does it take to get their revenue? So I fundamentally believe that marketing has become a very tough profession. It's really become very exciting also. But also, I think the opportunity exists for marketers to kind of think through is, do they have the right data to make decisions? 10 years ago, did not have the luxury. So I think we've been very fortunate, if you are kind of forward looking, to kind of say, how can you join the entire ecosystem together? And as we evolve, you know that artificial intelligence, even though it's not very mature, is going to really come in and make marketers' job even easier, because we don't have to sift through mounds and mounds of data to make decisions. Things can be done on the fly for us. Dynamic marketing, we already leveraging is, I mean, example I'll use is, now you can actually take 4 creative concepts and 4 different subject lines and all marry together on the fly, and then target a different audience. You couldn't do it 5 years ago. I think the technology is matured, but I think our thinking has to really evolve to take advantage of all the tools which are available for us. In my next slide. So this is kind of, I mean, you guys have seen it, is, I mean, the touch points are huge today. I mean, I think you have close to about 1,000 to 2,000 interactions any brand can have with the customers all across the journey. And we mapped out at PenFed, we probably had about 30 to about 60 touch points at a given time to a prospect customer. And you can't even measure every touch point, and you probably don't even know what impact it has essentially on your cost per acquisition, your revenue. But we know that customer interact with us in all these channels. And the underlying theme I use basically is, data and experience is going to be very important, but technology is going to be the key. Is, can you deliver the experience in real time? And do you have the right marketing strategy, and do you have the data to define everything? So this is kind of at a high level is what customers expect, and most of the brands will probably do some of it, but a good brand and leader will probably do everything on this kind of chart. And you'll see that the top of the line is digital experiences, bottom is physical. So I think it has to be a combination of physical and digital. While digital is really kind of leading the way in the pandemic, there is something to be said about the physical touch point. It could be a call to a contact center. It could be walking into a retail location. It could be picking up your food at a restaurant, which you kind of ordered online. So I'll say that 70% of our focus is going to be digital, but 30% still has value in terms of really kind of having the human to human interaction with your customer. So I know I hear a lot of things in 2022. Yeah, it's going to be 100% digital. Contact center is going to get killed. Retail location is going to get decimated. But I fundamentally don't believe that's the truth. That most of transactions will happen online, but there has to be something said about your physical one-to-one interaction, and that will change over time. So that's kind of my view in terms of what we need to kind of look at as a marketer. Complicated customer touch points, 100 to 1,000 interactions on a daily basis, but you have to focus on the experience, technology, and the data piece of it. Next slide, please. So this is kind of, I think, as I look at marketing is, I mean, if you talk to your C-level suite and it's what's above, you basically see the iceberg. Is what people see is the tip of the iceberg is, yeah, I need to do my email. I need to do basically my social media. I need to do X, Y, and Z. But what really needs to happen is really below. If you look at the iceberg below the water, and that's basically 90% of the work, which really people don't account for and think is, yeah, it's a lot easier. So I'll probably say marketing 10 to 20% is what you see, and 80% is below the line or below the water. Is how do you really do you have the right CRM? Do you have the right data? Are you looking at insights? Are you looking at basically your channel performance and marketing operations? This is where I think we need to invest in, because when I start my marketing journey, I really want to make sure that we are focusing on both. And the hardest part was, I'll say, below the water, right? The 80% of the iceberg, which people really don't see and understand the value. And sometimes your CEO will probably question you, saying, yeah, I'm giving you $1 million. So why are you spending like $400,000 on technology and data? Can't you just put ads out there? I think that's going to be a tough conversations. But eventually, I think you have to be able to build the bottom in order to kind of build the top, right? So I think that's going to be important. It's hard to convince executives, but that's the only way you'll get the funding and you'll probably have success. The next slide, please. So I think when I lead any transformation, whether it's marketing or business, I really kind of put out this slide: is do you want to be Best Buy or do you want to be Sears? For people who kind of are old enough to know what Sears was, it was basically largest retail operation. And last I looked at the data, I think almost 2 years ago before the pandemic, they had 137 to 140 million customers or basically email addresses on their file, but they did not leverage any of them as they started moving towards transformation. Best Buy, on the other side, used customer data. They understood behavior. They used insights and really kind of doubled down on the retail presence based on the data they had. Sears ignored the data, and Best Buy kind of leveraged the data. And if you look at the market cap of Best Buy, I don't think Sears kind of exists the way it is. So I think that's basically the power in saying, where do you want to be? And these are kind of reminders I have to myself every month, say, hey, we really need to invest. We may not have the ROI immediately, but if we don't, we might just be following the case study of Sears, and no brand wants to be Sears. So I think that's kind of an honest way of looking and planning. Next slide, please. So I think when I start, I think you can use as a template. Subra touched on this. Certain kind of templates I use, certain kind of frameworks I use. As you kind of try to sell the vision to your leadership, is I think the first and foremost, I define the vision, and then how do you execute? And for me, kind of it's these four things which really matter. Is any brand has to be customer centric. They need to make decisions based on data. We don't have the luxury of $1 billion like JP Morgan Chase or maybe Capital One to spend on marketing where you can spray and pray. So we have to be thoughtful in terms of where we want to spend our dollars. And you really need to kind of have a dynamic marketing and sales organization. Is that marketing drives the leads? If you're B2B, sales executes on it. You measure end to end in terms of how much money you spend, what's the customer acquisition cost, and how you're doing on that. And we have to be able to leverage technology. Today, it's not a choice. 7 years ago, you could argue, yeah, we don't have all the data. Today, everything exists. Everything is automated. You can leverage a marketing stack, whether you use the, I'll say, state-of-the-art marketing technology stack you could pay $1 million for, or you use mid-tier technology stack. You still need it. You need to automate things and just take it from there. The customer centricity really allows you to have a central view of the customer, and then you can use data essentially to kind of drive your marketing technology and essentially use your integrated marketing channels to drive your marketing, and then obviously use the technology piece of it. So this has kind of been my kind of guideline in terms of how do you transform a brand, what are the four pillars you want to use, and all these four are important, and you have metrics behind it. So this has kind of been my playbook over the last 5-7 years to take it forward. Next slide, please. So I think when I start, I think I always take a step back and saying, guys, I mean, what do you want to do? I think a lot of people just jump into tactics and saying, hey, we have a data problem. Let's get a CDP or a CRM. Oh, we have an experience problem. Let's redo the entire website. But I always want to take a step back and saying, where are we today, right? Is what's the business landscape? Because some industries, for example, if you're healthcare or government, is probably going to transform a little slowly. So yeah, there are issues. So landscape, you have a little bit more time. But if you are in retail or travel or food delivery, there's no way you could actually not do 100% digital, because the landscape has changed over the last 2 years, and that's the need of the hour. You look at the business landscape, then you understand in terms of where can you spend in terms of marketing. For example, our target market is between 45 to 65 years old. And a lot of people came to me and saying, hey, we need to do TikTok. And I looked at the data and said, okay, less than 0.1% of my audience on TikTok. So I really wouldn't invest in it. For me, Facebook works. So I think you really have to kind of understand where your customer is and design your marketing landscape around it. And one of the things we are doing is we are over investing in direct mail and television, because we know our customers and our prospects eventually watch it. So I think that's kind of how you define your marketing landscape, and then really understand where you are in terms of your digital applications, leverage data and technology. I think that's kind of the first phase I use in terms of discovery, and that really helps me build a business case. Can help you guys also build a business case and saying, hey, the 4 or 5 areas we need to think about, and get a seat at table with the leadership team. Next slide, please. And I mean, if you build something from scratch, is my framework, my personal favorite is everything starts with your CRM and your data. You build your CRM, then marry together with all the second party, third party data analytics you have. After you've done that, then you essentially use your marketing automation platform, and then you can optimize for experience. I fundamentally believe CRM and data is very important, because if you don't have the foundation elements, your marketing automation tools can't really help you, right? If your data is not clean, you're targeting the wrong customers, you're not going to really move the dial, and you can build the best experience. But if the wrong customer coming in, they'll never buy from you. So that's kind of my pillar. I call it the core. Is if you were to start from scratch, I'll probably first focus on the CRM, then really have a data platform on top of it, build your marketing automation capability on top of it, and then kind of optimize for your experience, advertising, and promotion. So some of the people I've seen, they start with your experience and then try to figure out their marketing automation, and then last they say, oh my God, I don't have a CRM. So I was probably, being a marketer, I'd probably start from the reverse. And it's helped me out in delivering kind of good numbers for the last couple of years during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So I think if this is kind of something I put together, is that if you were to start from scratch, where would you invest? So like I said, first I would invest in a CRM. Second, I would invest in a customer 360 data platform that goes beyond the CRM. It takes your member and non-member data, or customer and prospect data. You build a marketing experience platform on top of it, and then once you acquire a customer, focus on loyalty, because a lot of people focus on acquisition, not enough people focus on engagement and retention, and then always be looking at new capabilities. The example I use always is basically the cable providers. They will probably pay somebody $600 to acquire, but if you're a customer as saying, hey, I want to leave, they probably won't give you anything. So I think they love acquisition, but loyalty is what I say pays the bill. So if you keep in mind, I think they'll probably help you out as well. Uh, Next slide, please. So this is kind of things I've learned basically along the way. I want to put, say, the mistakes I've made, or things I've learned, is that when I started my career, I was more focused on product, I was more focused on technology. I really didn't have a full view in what really drives the business. So now, sitting at a leadership role, I understand the KPIs of the organization. So I then tell people, guys, I mean, focus on business insights versus data collection, because I've seen that when you take on a data project, you'll probably spend millions of dollars in terms of collecting data without really understanding the use case of why it's important to the business. And that's where I think most data projects fail. So I always ask the question, hey, what are the business insights we can draw? Can we use them in our marketing and retention and engagement? And that really helps us out. The second one is the data is a business function, is versus the technology. I know a lot of organizations, it resides under technology. It's more than a data warehouse. It's more than essentially just building a platform. So if the data residing in the technology function, I don't think you can fundamentally get too much value unless you have a business partner who's driving the need of leveraging data. We always have people kind of selling as the best technology, whether it's marketing technology, CRM, or data. And my view has changed over time. Earlier, I should think, hey, let's get the best technology. But technology is becoming more and more of a commodity. So I would probably not focus on the best technology. I'll probably focus on the best use case. I've seen it happen in the past. People take a technology platform and saying, okay, now what are your business needs? Let's just retrofit it. It never works. It's painful, and most of these projects kind of shut down. So you really have to think through is saying, hey, what are the business needs? And then choose a technology or a platform which meets those business needs. Last but not the least, clean your data. I've seen some of my campaigns not work. because the data is not clean. We don't invest enough dollars in cleaning the data. We just transpose data from 10 different systems into one central data repository, whether you call it a data lake or a data warehouse or a customer data platform or 360 platform, and just say, hey, if you've got the data, let's make it run. So spend the time in data hygiene and cleaning it, because that really matters. And I'll say don't overinvest. Crawl, walk, run is the approach we take. I don't use 80% of data we collect. It's not necessary we collect it, we use for analysis, but for marketing purposes, I'm happy with using 20, 25 fields on a regular basis versus 300 to 400 data fields we have. So I think that's kind of been my journey. Next slide, please. And end of the day, right, I tell people, right, it's all about the customer experience. When you spend millions of dollars getting people to the door, you want to make sure that they stick. And these are kind of three things in today's modern marketing you have to worry about. Do you have the right marketing? Are you sending the right messages? Do you have the right product? If they come look at your marketing and use the product, will they be satisfied with it? Do you have the right data and technology and insights to kind of help customers along the way and give you enough information to show you could request the new changes and features, and make sure the customer sticks around? So this is kind of my kind of, I'll say, mantra in a nutshell, and open to questions as we go. That's all I have. I went through it real fast because I was telling Subra I want to leave enough time for Q&A versus being a monologue. So
No, not at all. In fact, thanks for the wonderful keynote, Gaurav. In fact, we will now open it up for Q&A. So in case you'd like to ask Gaurav any questions, I have quite a few. So I mean, I'm going to keep asking them in between your questions. So please do raise your hand in MS Teams, or if you're not able to do that, just type in your question. You raise your hand, and the organizers should allow you in. So we are ready to take questions. So while we wait for folks to join in, Gaurav, let me just sort of kickstart and ask you. So I think one of the things that I'm particularly keen to understand is the people element, right? So we often speak of technology and how to leverage it, but I think it goes hand in hand with pulling a team along, pulling the entire organizations, your IT teams and your leadership and the rest of the team along, right? So how do you, as a marketing leader, do something like this, in the sense that you teach your team to really embrace risks and to sort of work with disruptive technology? So any thoughts on that front?
So I think I always lead with what the business driver. A lot of times I've heard, if you look at one of the slides which had those 5 kind of things, is business landscape, marketing landscape. I think everybody has to be in the same page. I think we get so focused on execution that we forget to give the entire team the purpose, right? Why are we going through change? What's the impact to the customer? What's the impact to the business? I think whether you're technology, whether you're data, whether you're legal compliance, you know, get the entire team together and saying why it's important for the enterprise. So I think that's what we feel. I think change management is the hardest part, but that really becomes the leader's DNA. It's not about the how, it's about why you're doing it, and the how becomes a lot easier. I think a lot of people get confused in saying, I've done such a good job in my part, but I don't understand what it really means. So I think how to share the vision, get the team on board, and things will always go down south. No project I know in the history, I know maybe Subra, you guys have pulled miracles, goes as planned. Things come in, injects happen, the environment changes. How do you really build an agile team and be okay with making mistakes? That's why I kind of say crawl, walk, run. You have to overinvest in the crawl phase, lesson learned, and then you kind of walk and just execute. I think leadership has a lot of patience if you tell them the complete story. And if you tell them, oh, I can get done in 6 months. No, guys, here's the plan. It'll be a 3-year journey. We'll do something in Q1, something in Q2. We learn the lessons and we evolve, because it's hard. It's never easy.
Understood. I think the whole notion of crawl, walk, run is something that at least I also advocate to customers I speak to, that think big, have a big vision, but when you kick off, start small, start with use cases, Start with one or two use cases, and I think you were talking about that as well. Be use case focused, start small, and then sort of build on that quarter on quarter. I think that clearly is the recipe for success for sure.
Yeah, I think the what's going to get tough. I know everybody's 100% remote. We've noticed in our teams also. It's easy to kind of run a project and a program which is already in motion, but just kick off any strategic project and get people aligned on Zoom and Teams. I think that's going to be the challenge, is how do you really make sure that you can get stuff done in the global? You have efficiencies, but how do you align people? I think alignment is the biggest opportunity. I don't know how to solve that problem. If you guys have any guidelines how it's worked for your team, I'd love to hear it. But I think that's where I think it gets tough
Yeah,
uh, for organizational leaders.
absolutely, absolutely. For anyone has any questions? Okay, we have Ashish joining us. Ashish, go ahead.
Yeah, Ashish.
Hi, Gaurav. Thank you, first of all, for a very good presentation there and sharing your experience. So I have actually two questions, but if I'm allowed to ask only one, then I'd love to know, how do you decide whether picking up a CDP solution versus a marketing data hub or customer 360 solution? And
Yeah.
the second question is more on the use cases. If you were to field a CDP, what would be a practical way of starting small and the crawl, walk, run approach that you advocated?
Yes, I think that you had mentioned is like Subra also mentioned the use case pretty important, right? Because we can't solve world hunger. Is saying what is the easiest use case we could take and release and do. First of all, I think I'm a huge fan of first party data. Do we have all the data in house? And if not, then do we have? I mean, with I don't know what the cookieless world looks like. Can we utilize third party data in 2 or 3 years? I'm not sure. Can build your first party data, and then if you can really marry second party and third party, and then use a platform which meets your need. Because I know B2C is going to be a lot different than B2B. And how do you make sure you can reach the customer and you really have data insights? Some of the CDPs will give you a 360 view. Some of the CDPs won't give you the insights. So I will actually look at the insights. Is yeah, I'm using a CDP. Forget the cost, right? Is it getting me the insights? Can I marry all the data I have with them, and can they give me decisions really fast? Because in digital marketing, you really need to make decisions on the fly, and I typically kill campaigns very earlier on if the read is not good. I'm not spending more money. So I think it's going to be important. And clean the data, right? The CDP is not going to work with you if your data hygiene is not there. Because I've seen that I'll just retrofit data and say, man, it's not making sense. It's not a CDP's fault. Your data is unclean. So what was the second question, Ashish? Sorry, I forgot that. So
Ashish, you're on mute. I think just unmute yourself, please.
Oh, thank you. What might be the good use case if you were to start with a CDP?
So I'll take the most complicated, right? I'll probably, if you looked at my customer journey, because that's what I think at some point I'll take the easiest use case. In this case, I'll take the hardest use case, saying, hey, we actually evolved to the worst case scenario. If your CDP could meet that, then your use case, the front end should be easy. Because it's very difficult to change your CDP in midstream. Because say, oh my God, I did the easiest use case. They can't meet my need. I've invested 2 years and $1 million. Now I can't go to my boss and say, man, I messed up, right? So I think use that and give them. I've done in the past. I've actually given my partners the use cases upfront and gone through the RFP processing. Can you show how will you execute versus just only PowerPoint? Do the hard work upfront. They'll be happy, and you'll be happy too. So
That's a great advice. Thank you, Gaurav.
thanks, Ashish.
Okay, we have 5 minutes more. So Tim's on. Go ahead, Tim.
Gaurav, good morning, sir. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. We've talked a lot about data today. We talked a lot about the processes and the vision that you have, which is wonderful. But when we get down to it, how important, how much stress and effort, or was it smooth to get the data security cleared through compliance and to make sure that you felt comfortable with security in general of the data, being at a bank and being such an influential person within the credit union? Can you share with us and the other attendees the challenges or the opportunities you faced?
Yeah, so I always, and knowing working in financial institution like you guys do, they are very conservative. They care about PII, and they are not as forward looking like we guys are. We live and breathe data, they don't. So I think whenever we start engaging in the RFP, I get my compliance team involved upfront because I will say it honestly, it's faster to execute a contract with a partner than get our internal compliance aligned. So I build in enough time. We have to educate them because they are worried about PII, security hacks. Is the vendor getting all my PII information? So tomorrow a hack happens, then I'm on the hook for all the losses. So I think one is education. And secondly, putting the guardrails together and making them comfortable that, hey, tomorrow if you run an audit, the partner can do the audit and fairly comfortable. It's never an easy process because any financial institution will have people who've been there 25, 30 years and they have risk averse. And data is the biggest source of risk for them. And second is hacking, right? If we get hacked. So unfortunately, both fall under my area. And it takes longer, Tim, to be very honest, but we work through it because once you get that thing done, it's so easy because I'll say in a financial institution probably take 3 to 6 months to get your compliance comfortable.
Right.
So
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm sure it's challenging, but you sounded like you got it done. So that's the best part about the whole story.
yeah. Because sometimes the partner will ask us, right? They're saying, why is it taking so much time? And it's not that we are sleeping and not acting on it, but it's internal stakeholders we have to feel comfortable because we have regulators we have to kind of talk to. So I think it's a lot harder. I wish I could just buy software and plug it. Retail is a lot easier.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have time for one more question. So if anyone has any other question, please jump in. Okay, fantastic. So Gaurav, thank you once again. Really, really appreciate your time this morning. It was incredible listening to you. So for the folks who are listening in, we will be sharing the conference presentation as well as the video of the conference as well. So keep looking out for that. Gaurav, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your keynote. Thanks for joining us this morning. Okay, we move to the next session now. Do we have David in already? I saw David join. I'm assuming he's in. Okay. David. Bijoy, is David in?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So let me introduce David Raab, who's joining me for a fireside chat today. David M. Raab is founder and CEO of the Customer Data Platform Institute, www.cdpinstitute.org, a vendor-neutral organization with over 10,000 members, which educates marketers and technologists about customer data management. David named the customer data platform category in 2013. So David has a long history as an independent consultant, helping marketers to understand, find, and deploy marketing technologies and vendors. His clients include Global 2000 firms in retail, financial services, telecommunications, publishing, technology, and other industries. He began his career as a marketer in publishing and continuities. David holds a bachelor's degree from Columbia University and MBA from the Harvard Business School. He has written hundreds of articles and blog posts on marketing technology and regularly speaks and teaches at events around the world. We're so thankful to have you here this morning. David, warm welcome to the Lemnisk Customer Data Platform Summit.
Thank you, Subra. Pleasure to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. David, and let me start by asking you this. Last December, when the world was, I guess, between multiple waves of the pandemic, you talked about key Martech plot lines for 2021. That was quite brave. Did you actually expect you would get grilled on those predictions?
I thought you were going to say it was brave because we didn't know if the world was going to make it another year. It did seem to be a little in question at that time. But no, I did not expect, you only make predictions on the assumption that people are going to forget them immediately, just so you sound clever at the time. But now you've caught me to rights here.
Yeah, so let's see if you're Nostradamus, David. So I thought we would just talk through those four key Martech plot lines that you called out. I will just sort of take them one by one and sort of let's just sort of throw it around a little bit and see how that sort of prediction panned out, right? So the first one, David, the first of these. So you said data will, and I quote you, will become more accessible, that marketers want to be data driven is old news. What's changing is that years of struggle is finally yielding progress towards making data more available and providing the tools to use it. as with digital advertising, the pandemic has accelerated an existing trend, achieving in months digital transformations that would otherwise have taken years. So I think this is a fairly straightforward one. I mean, obviously, we did see a lot of this happen, but how did you see this play out through the year, maybe in terms of timeline and in terms of how this adoption happened?
Well, I think it did play out, certainly. The CDP Institute, industry rather, where I spend most of my time, certainly had a very good year. The acceleration of digital transformation, which was caused largely by the pandemic, really increased the demand for data, because many companies quickly realized that they couldn't do digital transformation unless they had the data to base it on. So there was a huge amount of energy that was put into finally getting all the data they knew was there, but they knew it was siloed, and they were having all kinds of challenges in getting it together, and really just sort of moving aside a lot of the barriers, which are more organizational than technical, and actually making it happen and then using it. So we saw a huge amount of progress in that, definitely.
And did you see, David, in this adoption, did you sort of feel like certain industries were already there, and maybe certain other industries were sort of playing a catch-up game? I mean, how did you see that pan out?
Some industries are definitely ahead of others. I think every industry showed advancement, even the ones like retail, which in particular had done a pretty good job with their data already. Online retail, e-commerce, partly because it's easy, because it's all online, so the data is relatively accessible compared to trying to get data out of a POS system in a physical retail store. But even those guys have advanced quite substantially. Financial services, which had been a bit of a laggard, actually showed good progress. The travel industry had a tough year.
Tough year.
So I can't say we saw a lot of activity in that industry. But telecom, certainly we saw good advancement, and B2B showed huge growth.
Yeah.
Really, just even in the last 6 months, we're just B2B just is popping up all over on the data side. A lot of intent data becoming more available that hadn't been. I think one of the things, maybe we'll talk about it later, about data availability, was people were worried about privacy. And although privacy definitely has had a huge impact, it did not shut off the flow of data as many people kind of feared it would. In fact, if there seems to be more third-party data sloshing around the world than ever, privacy rules notwithstanding. Now we'll see if that changes, because some of the more recent changes, from Apple with ATT and the IDFA and all those things, and some of the changes that even Chrome is making, even though that they deferred the deprecation of cookies, those are beginning to have an impact and beginning to make some change in the availability of data. But at the moment, there's still just a flood of it out there.
I mean, I'll come back to data availability and privacy. I think you touched upon a very important topic in the context of CDP especially. But what was, to the folks who were potentially lagging, like you called out, I'm sure you would have spoken to quite a few of marketing leaders through the last, few quarters as they sort of thought through their digital transformation. What was your advice? I mean, how should somebody potentially who's like, for example, in the audience or otherwise, maybe got left behind for whatever reason, didn't get started on that digital journey? What's your advice to them in terms of how to get started now and sort of be effective?
Well, the advice for getting started really doesn't change, pandemic or no pandemic. It's all about understanding what your use cases are, what you're trying to accomplish, being realistic in your goals. And then more than anything else, looking carefully at what data you have available. We're talking internal data here, to see if the data is really usable. Let me know if you can't hear me, because I'm getting a sign.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, fine. So set your use cases, take a close look at your data, and then deal with the organizational issues. We just actually finished a survey, which we haven't published yet, where we asked people who had problems with the CDPs. Thank you for answering. If they had a problem, what was the problem? And the most common answer was organizational issues. Not so much the classic, oh, we didn't get cooperation, which is kind of the one you expect. It was more, we didn't prepare the organization. We didn't train people. They didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. So pay close attention to that. Make sure that not only have you defined your use case at the start, but you've actually trained your people to execute those use cases, because that turns out to be probably the biggest problem of all.
Yeah, we touched upon this. I think at the fag end of the keynote, and Gaurav answered this question. His approach was very similar, by the way. Just sort of look at your data, look at the use cases, work from there, and then sort of obviously the organizational aspect as well in terms of taking the team along. Yeah, great. So I would obviously say that panned out well in terms of prediction, David. So the next one, let's just look at the second prediction. So I think the second prediction was that artificial intelligence will become even more ubiquitous, right? So, and again, I quote you, it just seems like yesterday that we were impressed to hear that a company's product was AI powered. Today, that's as exciting as being told their offices have electric lights, but AI continues to grow stronger, even if it doesn't get as much attention. And the real reason for its growth, maybe that interactions are shifting to digital channels where success will be based more on relentless analytics than an occasional flash of uniquely human insight. So that's what you said. So let's talk about this. So did you? And this is something that I mean, I always feel, AI and machine learning, you always have to take it with a pinch of salt. But did you really see this happen? And in how can you say that with confidence?
We actually did see it, but again, the prediction was that you wouldn't notice it. It would just sort of fade into the background.
Sneaky.
So the fact you didn't see it proves that I was right? So I can't lose on that prediction. But I would argue that in fact, not only did it fade into the background, but it really is there in the background, stronger than ever. We did see some amazing use cases in the foreground, if you will, about systems that were pretty much running an entire marketing program from the start to finish, using the AI to guide it along the way. Connecting the individual AI tools into a sort of a whole, so it would not only would identify your opportunities, and it would select the audiences, and it would actually test out the copy and do all those, kind of at the push of a button. Now, yeah, be a little careful. Can't really walk away after you push that button. But so there were some sort of flagship AI, very public deployments. But beyond that, everything simply has AI inside. We stopped calling it AI. Now we just go back to calling it machine learning or analytics or whatever. And so it's everything is there. It's both acting autonomously and acting to assist people. So not necessarily replacing the analysts or the marketers or the users, but showing them things, making suggestions, pulling out nuggets of information that they might have missed or patterns they might not have seen, and just making their jobs a little easier. Doing data prep, there's been a huge amount of progress in the past year in using AI to handle the data preparation steps, understanding what data is in your systems, checking the quality of it, improving it, making fixes, cleaning it. Those are all things that traditionally have been very, very labor intensive. And we're seeing more and more of that be automated. So that's a huge progress that kind of happens a little, again, in the background behind the walls, but makes a big, big difference in how quickly things get done, and even in the quality of the results. Better data obviously gives better results.
And again, in terms of if you were to maybe pick, I mean, either industry wise or use case wise, like 2 or 3 where you feel like AI has really sort of helped, taken off in a big way, almost become ubiquitous, if you will, to quote you, and maybe a couple of areas where you feel AI hasn't really created the impact that we expected it to create. I mean, what would your thoughts be there?
I think in campaign optimization and segmentation, we just see it everywhere, and it does have a very major impact. And there's been a few studies where people have proven if you let our algorithm select your audience rather than selecting yourself, you'll get 10-20% better results. So that's been a huge area of impact, and that goes directly to the bottom line. That's super important to marketers to get good return on their media investments. An area, and I've been impressed with things like content optimization, so as opposed to media optimization, both creating versions and testing them out, and AI can do that at huge scale that people simply can't test as many options. And beginning now the AI to actually write the copy and write the headlines. It's been going on for a couple of years, but again, I think it's becoming more and more common. Areas where it hasn't had as much impact as one might have expected. Well, we don't see much in strategy yet, at the very high level. It still does take that, we think, flash of human insight to really grasp what customers want and maybe give them things that have not already been done. The thing about AI is it learns from experience. And it learns from someone else's experience. You give it a training set and it figures out what happened in that training set. Well, if a particular thing wasn't ever tested in the training set, the AI really has no way to think, oh, this is an option. So there's a certain limit to how creative AI can get, although it's pretty creative. And if you think about most of the people we deal with, they're not too creative either. So, maybe it's, and then your boss tells you can't do it because it's never been tried before. It's like, well, how do you know it doesn't work if it hasn't been tried? But so, maybe the AI is as smart as your boss. I don't know.
I guess part of it, compared to a decade back, David, if you look at, the evolution of AI, it's almost become so easy to adopt. I mean, you can just with a few clicks set up your own model, deploy it, test it out. So, I think it's fair to say that the compared to a decade back, the infra and the algo itself isn't as important anymore. I mean, at the cost of sounding, or trivializing this, it's maybe getting commoditized very quickly, right? So, so where is the value then? Is it in the data itself? Is it in the uniquely human insight or the strategy that comes at the top, that flash that creates value? Where do you see for somebody trying to start again, let's say on this journey, where should they start? I mean, how do they make this sort of deliver?
Well, just because something is commoditized doesn't mean it doesn't create value. Okay, my cell phone is commoditized. It still creates a lot of value for me. So is my computer. So don't confuse the two. If you're a vendor, it's a different story. You don't want to be selling commodity product, but as a consumer, you're very happy to buy a commodity product. So the fact that the AI algorithms have in fact been commoditized, I totally agree with that. Doesn't mean they're valuable. It means it's actually easier for you to use, and the value then is created for the user in how they apply those systems to create it, and how I apply my computer, not in the fact that I have a computer. Whereas 30 years ago, just having a computer actually gave me a lot of value. So the places you're going to get it are going to be in which data you feed it, what you train it on, and the more unique your data and the more cleverly you pose the questions, the more value you're going to get out of that. So getting good data and getting unique data are even more important in the AI world than they were in the non-AI world. And then being able to use the stuff. I mean, it always comes out to activating, right? We can get brilliant insights out of the AI, but unless we push them out to the edge, and we either act on them outside of the AI system, which is okay. We have an insight, we create a campaign based on that insight, and now the AI is no longer in the picture. We built the campaign, or we use the AI as part of the tool, so the system is interacting with us in real time, using the AI to give better responses to whatever situation it's posed with. Those are areas where AI will continue to create true value regardless of the commodification status of the AI technology itself.
Fantastic. On to the third one. This one I think was probably the most interesting of the lot, and I would love to really understand because I think it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of how you see evolution happening. But your third prediction was, and I quote you, blockchain will quiet down. And you said, I list blockchain only to point out that's been an underachiever in the hype generation department. So talk about the prediction itself. How did you see that pan out? But I think also talk to us about, do you actually see this changing now, at least in the next few quarters? Because I mean, I would say decentralization and blockchain almost seems to be inevitable in the so-called Web3 world we're headed into. So do you see this changing, or do you continue seeing this? You don't seem to have a particularly very positive outlook to this. So talk to us about that.
Well, again, it's not so much that blockchain is not valuable as that. We really have not heard that much about it as we used to. We used to hear about AI and blockchain kind of as frequently as each other, and now we hear about AI tons, and blockchain every now and then comes up. Blockchain, I think, from a publicity standpoint, was tarnished because of the cryptocurrencies. It was so closely associated with that, and there's considerable concern about whether those are a scam or not. But we do see blockchain applications. We're seeing a lot just now. Two big areas: media. We're seeing blockchain tracking media in ways I'm not even sure I technically understand. But the media ecosystem is so filled with fraud.
Yeah,
That the security of the blockchain gives you a possibility of actually tracking things through and making things really happen the way they were supposed to happen. And we're seeing a considerable, just recently actually, we're seeing considerable media applications of blockchain. And the other big one, of course, is privacy, where again, you're buying this data. Now you really actually have to know where the data came from. And blockchain allows you to create that secure chain of ownership on the data to understand, yeah, the consent really was legitimate consent, and here's where it came from, and I can trace it back to the actual customer giving me that consent. So those are two huge areas where we see a great deal of potential for blockchain. And again, not perhaps as much as we will be seeing, but it's a clear problem. Blockchain is actually a good solution to it. There are no doubt smart people working on it. So they will burst forth, like flowers in the spring coming up above the dirt when the time is right.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to bring up, we left the conversation on sort of privacy a little bit open-ended a few minutes back. So I actually wanted to bring it up in this context. I mean, despite all of the changes that we have spoken should happen in the privacy space, I think it's fair to say there's still a rampant abuse, I would say, of customer data, privacy, and things like that. So I guess in that context, maybe you do see blockchain applications potentially disrupting this, or do you see any other broad trend in this space over the next few quarters? Let's touch upon that.
Well, privacy is very dynamic right now, as you know. Part of the issue has simply been that there were laws, GDPR in particular, that basically weren't enforced. And now we're beginning to see some actual enforcement activity out of a number of the authorities who are in Europe. So that will change things. We begin to see some large fines. Simultaneously with that, and overlapping it, is the antitrust concern. And those two are increasingly linked. Really, just the last few weeks, the Facebook revelations have accelerated it, although it was all happening before then. We're in that period of time, people are going to say, the reason that these people can get away with privacy violations is because they're monopolists. Yeah. So even though people don't want their privacy violated, they have no choice but to deal with these companies. So there is very much a connection between monopoly and antitrust on the one hand and privacy violations on the other. And as the regulators and the governments and, dare I say, politicians actually recognize this, which they finally seem to have gotten, there could be some fundamental changes. This whole notion of surveillance economy or surveillance advertising, which had seemed somewhat radical 2 years ago, has suddenly become very widely understood and increasingly accepted. So we're finally beginning to see people say, maybe we just should not allow the collection of this data. Forget about consent, because consent doesn't work. We've all kind of known consent didn't work, because what are you going to do? Yes, of course you're going to accept every consent banner you're presented with. You have no choice. So that choice thing comes into the monopoly. So on the one hand, maybe there would be real choice if you didn't have the monopoly. But on the other hand, why are we letting these people collect this data anyway? Because it turns out it's not all that good for the consumer. Yeah. We all claim it's good for the consumer, and marketers out there may disagree with me. The other thing that I think is happening, and this will be my prediction for next year, is that the publishers who have been frightened to death at the loss of cookies because they wouldn't be able to do the measurement and the targeting that they did with third-party cookies will realize that they're better off without that targeting. They were doing quite nicely assembling audiences and selling contextual-based advertising for millennia. before the internet, because that's what the traditional advertising is. And then they got used to the cookies, and then when cookies were taken away, oh my God, we're going to lose our cookies. But the cookies destroyed their business. The cookies made it so you couldn't do quality journalism. You couldn't get rewarded for assembling a quality audience. Like, guys, why are you trying to replicate this thing that destroyed you? So it's going to take them a while to make that connection. But I think those little light bulbs will start going off. And then all of a sudden, the publishers who have been very concerned about protecting their ability to collect data will turn around and say, we don't really need this data. We're happy not to collect it. And not only that, we don't think anybody else should collect it either. So I think there's going to be a huge sea change. And this is out there. I mean, this is not, I can't say I'm seeing this. I'm just I just put the pieces together, and I figure everybody else will get it quick enough. Probably they already got it and just weren't talking about it if I got it. So I think we may see a real fundamental change in the attitude towards data collection from the publisher side, from the business side, because consumers are already there. They don't want their data collected already.
So, I mean, just picking an earlier point that you mentioned, that how can all of this data be good for consumers? I mean, and of course, as a marketing vendor, I maybe I have a vested interest in asking this question even. But how do you sort of reconcile what you said with so many surveys that have fundamentally showed that consumers do want personalization, and that if there is good transparency around how the data is getting collected and used, they would actually love to give up their data. And as an extension of that, do you potentially see interesting business models that have been spoken about now for years now, where potentially consumers get paid for sort of sharing their data and sort of it getting utilized?
Yeah, there's this whole notion of self-sovereign identity, which is a term, again, mark my words, you're going to be hearing more about, which has been kicking around for decades. And the people who are into it are really into it, and they have developed very, very sophisticated concepts, which nobody understands except for them, or at least I don't understand them, and I'd have tried. But that's beginning to break into the mainstream, and it's exactly that's the notion that people should own their own data, which of course they already do legally, but they really should control how it is used and accessed, and maybe get paid for it. The problem with paying people for their data is, there's a lot of people out there, and you can't pay anybody too much if you're really going to do it in mass. So it's more really about giving them control over their data than it is about really, I'm going to get a nickel if I let you show me an advertisement. So that's one stream of it. But as a marketer, as an advertiser, if you really look at the surveys where people say they want personalization, they say, I don't want personalized advertising. In fact, they hate personalized advertising. They say, I want personalized experiences. I want it to be easier for me to make returns. I want, when I call into the call center, for the agent to know what products I bought. I want things that make my life easier. That's what they want their data to be used for. They don't want it to be used for advertising, and they certainly don't want it to be shared with other people, which does nothing to improve their experience with the company that collected it. So actually, consumers are not quite as confused as we sometimes think they are. We say, oh, there's the paradox of privacy, right? They don't want to share their data, but they want you to use their data. It's like, that doesn't work. Well, the reality is they don't want you to share their data with somebody else, and they want you to use their data to make their life easier. And those actually are pretty compatible, not conflicting desires.
So to some extent, maybe if we fast forward a few years down the line, basically, do you see this play out? Okay, third party basically dies, new forms of identities emerge. Maybe first party, which was already gold, continues to be king, and then you have potentially blockchain-based technologies to sort of take customer consent very clearly in terms of how data is getting organized. Is that sort of the future that we can look towards?
Yeah, they all do fit together. I think that is what will happen, because once you give consumers the right to determine how their data is used, that's what blockchain makes it really easier, because then you can prove that this consumer really gave that right, not just some person claimed they did and stole it. So it will evolve that way. And again, to be clear, there's a distinction to be made between collecting first-party data for use within the company, which consumers will gladly give up or have no choice because there's operational value, and being able to do targeted advertising based on third-party data. That's the model, the surveillance advertising model that I think is under increasing attack.
Yeah. Fantastic. Last prediction. No code will continue to grow. That was a prediction. I guess, again, this one could probably have taken the 2021 buzzword of the year. But I think no code has been a bit of a mixed bag. Clearly very valuable as a concept, David, but fraught with maybe executional issues, perhaps. What's your take here?
Well, yeah, that is exactly my take. Certainly, it is growing like crazy and will continue to grow. AI makes a lot of that possible. It's another thing where AI sort of lurks in the background and makes no code really possible. The demand for systems and processes that make me personally productive will never end, right? There's just so much that I need to do that I want my computer to do for me that no code makes possible, because I can build little applications or applets that serve me. The real challenge with no code is if I go to share that with somebody else, they don't know what I did. They don't understand how I put it together. They not think the way that I think. So that's the problem with no code. The challenge is, how do you scale no code applications beyond personal use? And there's been some discussion about that. It's still very much a challenge. I don't think anyone necessarily has an answer to that. But we are seeing, because there is substantial value to it, a lot of people trying to find ways to solve that problem. And then you have low code, which is also often lumped with no code, but is really very different, because low code is a tool for professionals. So that's a productivity enhancement for developers, as opposed to no code, which is a tool for end users or business users. And there's obviously some overlap. They are pretty different. And of course, low code also is growing tremendously. But low code, because it is just a productivity tool, I say just, doesn't jump out as such a radical change from what you've already been doing. I still have developers doing work. It's just all of a sudden they're getting a lot more work done, which I'm glad to hear that, right? Well, low code is what's making that happen, but it doesn't jump out at you in the same way it does when your 6-year-old comes up and say, hey, Dad, look at this app I just made. That goes into your bank account and does whatever it does.
Fantastic. I would really want to squeeze this question in. You touched upon this a few minutes earlier, but again, if you sort of look ahead at 2022, what do you see the Martech plot lines look like? Maybe, I think you touched on privacy as being one of these, but maybe the broad contours of what you do, 2 or 3 bullet points.
I think that retail networks, which I did actually talk about in last year's blog post as well, have grown tremendously. And I think there's going to be, as part of the reaction against the walled gardens, you have companies like Walmart and big retailers and big grocery stores, and I'm sure that's going on in India as well, who are sort of creating their own little walled garden, where they have all their interaction with their customers, and they use all their first-party data to serve advertising. So it may run into some privacy rules, but if it's controlled properly, it doesn't. So I think there's going to be an increasing growth for a number of reasons among these other little networks, where people who have large blocks of customer data based on their own business relationship will be serving those. And those then overlap with things like drone deliveries, and there's this notion of mobile retail, where you have a little convenience store inside of a van, and it drives around and sells things to people, delivers things to people. So there's going to be this whole sort of balkanization of the marketing world, where if you're Walmart, you can do everything, not just have a store, buy product and sell it, and then let the consumer take it home, but you can make your product, you can sell it to them on the web, you can deliver it through your delivery network. So like, it never leaves the control of Walmart or whatever, and you can advertise to them through your retail network. So you can have all these these fragmented experiences, and I think that's going to be a big trend that we're going to see. Now, the problem with that, and the challenge with that, is exactly the same problem we have with third-party data, which is it's great if they're already your customer, but how do you do acquisition? Where do I get these people from? So that's the other interesting thing that we saw, is out-of-home advertising. So digital out-of-home, DOE, I love, the acronym is DOE, right? Which is the way that you reach people, and even, God forbid, broadcast TV. linear, so-called linear TV or connected TV, anything where you're reaching people who are not already your customers are going to become more and more important. So that's another big trend that we're going to see again, getting outside of the walled gardens, other ways of reaching people who are not your customers and then bringing them into your walled garden, my little walled flower pot, and then keeping them and servicing them as your own. So, it's all about customer loyalty. It's all about trust. It's all about retention. These are all big themes we've been talking about, but I think we are going to see some Martech developments that support those in particular.
Fantastic. I think we can safely conclude, David, that your 2021 predictions were more or less bang on. Thank you for joining us. As always, it was incredibly insightful speaking to you. I'm sure the audience took a lot out of the session as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right, so we will now move to the last event of the day, our panel session titled The Rise of the Super Intelligent Marketer. I will now invite Tim Steele to introduce the panelists and moderate the panel. Tim, over to you. The stage is yours.
Appreciate it so much. I have a couple folks that are going to be joining me in a minute. So I have Hazem and looks like his white dog in the back. So hello
yes,
to Hazem.
there's a black dog somewhere there too. But
and, I also want to make sure that I thank my boss, my CEO, Subra, for calling this the super intelligent marketers and not the super intelligent VP of sales, because that would be a misnomer. So we're going to be joined by Carol Ferrari. Here she is, the beautiful and wonderful Carol Ferrari, and the beautiful and wonderful Hazem. I'm going to say sir, because I would feel miserable.
Sure.
So I am going to kick off this 30-minute raucous as a news journalist would, to have some fun with it, because I'm really, really thankful and happy for the folks that have participated thus far, and also my panelists. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of Hazem and Carol, and then we'll open it up for some discussion. And Carol and Hazem, once I introduce you, if you could share just a brief respite if I missed anything. So Hazem is a graduate of Marquette University. It's in Wisconsin. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in International Business and International Information Technology. He works for a great firm, an agency, digital agency that's well known globally. Y, which is a brand management company. He is the COO and managing partner. He has several decades of experience working with global brands and startups to develop meaningful across multiple mediums. He has a strong understanding of fields of international business, marketing, technology. Also has deployed enterprise-level multilingual projects across the globe. And really, it's having worked with him briefly in conversations, he's got a brilliant mind for what we're looking for in the marketplace, and has influenced some great companies. And I can't wait to hear his feedback on what he's looking forward to over the next year and some of the strategies as well. We've got Carol Ferrari. Carol's from Salary.com. She's the vice president of product marketing over there. Salary.com, for those of you who don't know, is in 140 countries. They started in 1999. They have over 2 decades. They have 25,000 associations that they work with, 15,000 clients, several million hits to their website. Carol is a smart lady. She's got an MBA from Rochester Institute, BS from Rochester Institute, and master's in business administration from the Illinois Institute of Technology, which I applied for and got flatly denied. With regards to Carol, we worked together at Soundbite Communications way back. She was instrumental in helping to bring that company public and is now owned by Genesis. She has several decades of experience in product marketing, and also very knowledgeable about the trends associated with data and all the other wonderful things that we want to discuss. So without further ado, I'd like to open this up for some questions and then leave it open at the end for a few. So Hazem, we'll start with you if that's okay, sir.
Sure.
All right. So in the essence of time, if we could share briefly and then and turn it over to Carol, and then we'll just interact that way. So we're here, we talked a lot about data over the past hour and a half, as you know. So from a business perspective, what kind of insights do you try to extract and leverage from the data with your clients, but also internally? And what type of intelligence do you get from that to drive business outcomes? In a clear and articulate way, as best I could, we talked about this the other day, but you are much better at articulating what we're trying to accomplish. So if you could share with me your thoughts, and then we can turn it over to Carol.
Sure, thanks. Well, I mean, on a weekly basis, we're really working with the same question with clients across the globe. Like, typically the CMO, their team, partner agencies, everybody at the table, and really regardless of location, of the industry type that we're dealing with, like everyone's kind of trying to answer the same things. What patterns and channels are we getting the most conversions from? Where's the attribution coming from? What tools of the communications are resonating to retain the existing customer base? And then what kind of core data is needed for the sales and the frontline workers that deal with the customers directly, to use that to kind of help nurture the relationship, to upsell it, etc. Right? So getting the data, really the raw data, is kind of the easy part. Cleaning it, as so many of the people that have contributed in this session, becomes the more challenging piece. And then where it gets a little bit even more complicated is you're starting to get system after system, and then you're getting more stakeholders come to those meetings, and everybody has their kind of set of agenda of what's important and what data KPIs are needed, etc. So keeping everyone focused becomes the bigger challenge of what is the problem we're trying to solve. Your keynote speaker actually just said something that was very good in terms of set those business use cases very much upfront, rather than trying to kind of then start doing all the architecture of where we're getting the data and all that kind of stuff. So once we know this is the problem we're trying to solve, everybody's aligned on it. That typically, is 80% of the problem, gone behind us, and then it becomes a very tactical, mechanical piece of getting it. So, really, we're working right now with Formula One on one of their upcoming races, and we have a media agency, a PR agency, a social media agency, the internal stakeholders, the ad agency, and everybody's throwing, lots and lots of reports and data and, performance, and weekly. We sit in on, 2-hour calls every week, and it's like, okay, we're reviewing tables, and then what, and
Yeah.
And that really, where we kind of try to come in and say, okay, let's play a little bit of like to steer the ship in a little bit. So we try to get everybody back focused. We have a common objective across everybody there. We need to sell seats for an event, and there's a finite amount of seats. If we sell them, we succeeded. But with this, we kind of have to kind of look at there is a little bit of, it's never always as clear cut as that. So we always have, we have selling seats, but we also want to get the brand recognition, the intangible pieces of brand awareness. So, setting a strategy, for example, in this example, we worked with the media agency and the sales team and inside of the client to look at how do we align towards a purchasing cycle? Which channels are the ones that are creating those conversions? As we look into kind of the last month of sales, using historical data to help us predict the future, right? So maybe in the past we're seeing 50% of those tickets were actually sold in the last 2 weeks before an event. People wait till the last bit. So getting a little bit of that behaviors and patterns becomes more important and more, drives those kind of insights to help kind of achieve the goals you're setting. So that's, in a nutshell, how we've been using kind of data in some of the examples that we have. I have a few more, but I want to also hear from Carol. So I'll chime in as needed.
Thank you, Hazem. Carol, anything you'd like to add to that? You're on mute. You're on mute, Carol.
Sorry about that.
It's
I'm
okay.
a huge race car fan, so maybe I can get some tickets. I'm just kidding.
We'll trade some data.
You have to go and buy for this race, but it's good.
Well, I can't say that compensation and job description management software is exciting as in the race cars, but in our business, we have similar needs, and it's really, I 100% agree up front what you want to measure. And then when you're going through the process of looking at your data, if something is too complicated, you want a piece of data to make this piece of data A to make decision A. If it's going to be too time consuming to get that piece of data to make decision A, then you have to compromise. But do that up front and understand what you want to capture. We also look at our business of prospects, new business, and existing customers. And we make sure that we understand that customer journey from the first inception to closed won, as we call it, to future, the customer life cycle, what's beyond that. So we need to look at the channel, we need to look at the product mix, we need to look at pricing, we need to look at the packaging. And we also need to understand that same process for both new customers and prospects. So again, the key that we run into challenges is the different pieces of data along the system and putting them all together. And then we're dead set about getting a certain piece of data, but if takes too long, we keep going, and then we finally say, okay, we're giving up. So we just have to kind of balance the decision making with the kind of data we need to make really 100% accurate decisions. We kind of have to go, we're tangentially in the right direction, so we're good with that.
Okay. No, it's an interesting point that you make and Hazam makes. So just a quick follow-up to Hazam and then yourself, Carol, because you mentioned as well. So I use the word democratize. How do you democratize access to customer data and intelligence across the organization? So that's just a fancy way of saying who manages, who's one throat to choke type of thing. You know, how do you manage that process? Because you have a lot of people coming at you, right? You got a big company, millions of hits. You have agencies, you have multiple folks. How do you manage that? How do you manage the democratization of customer data and intelligence across salary and across all of your clients, Hazam?
Well, again, I mean, I think a common theme from this morning has been a lot about people and culture. So I feel like, you know, the tool set is the easy part again. So, you know, more often than not, we are seeing kind of benign, at least with our clients and so on, departments, they want to bring down walls. They want to remove the silos within the organization. The CIO and the CMO want to work together. But, you know, there's always cases, either, you know, legacy technology doesn't let us do what 1, 2, and 3, or there's legal restrictions and privacy information and so on, or sometimes plain old office politics kind of kick in, maybe not at the top level, but as you start working with the people you need day to day. And, you know, we found really our greatest success is kind of bringing those key stakeholders in early, really aligning them on like the objectives, show what the value we're trying to achieve and how they can be part of that winning story, how it can make whether their life, you know, easier, or put themselves at ease, that, you know, this kind of tool set isn't going to they're not going to cost them their job, things like that. I think, you know, it's really, it's more of a people problem, I find, than again, a technology piece. But I think, you know, when you do kind of achieve that, and that culture kind of, you know, shows why a data-driven kind of culture brings that efficiency, how they can, you know, it translates into the bonuses that they make at the end of the month and so on, because they're more efficient. You know, people, I think, become actually more proactive in sharing information, be like, hey, heads up, I saw this and this and this, than they were before. So yeah, it is for me a culture problem more than a technology one.
Ms. Ferrari? Same.
Yeah, I think ours is a system one versus process. So we have different departments and technologies that we use to try to bring it all together. And and typically the bigger chunks are the sales and the marketing are two separate ponds that come together in some of the systems, but how we want to extract the data is different depending on who's working with the data. So we have different people involved and try to come to a level of, like we were saying before, what do we want to measure? And you go over here and you get that data for us, and you go over here and you get that data for us, and it comes together with what Hazam said, the key stakeholders coming together and say, this is how we want to measure. So it's not as slam dunk, but we make it work because I'm working with everybody at salary.com. Hazam's working with various entities, separate companies, trying to bring them together. But in the end of the day, it's disparate, but the decision making about what we want to measure is centralized.
Yeah, one of the things we've all three of us have spoken about, just in general or just about us, is the siloed component of data analytics, right? And the personalization, the lack thereof, by having siloed and not being able to personalize and work those channels. So I know the thought process of doing that. Obviously, it sounds like the marketing trends are moving more and more towards combining that with a central repository or a CDP. And I know you're thinking about that. What prompted Hazam or Carol? What prompted you folks was there an event that happened, or just like, geez, we can't do this like this anymore? What was the light bulb that said, okay, Formula One, let's get our stuff together. Hey, whomever, let's get our stuff together. Or is it just someone just said, it's time to kind of pull this all together into one central repository?
So, I mean, from our side, typically, like I said, I think every single client of ours wants that customer 360 view. Everybody wants that centralized data view.
Right.
That kind of stuff. On the, with the F1 side, we were lucky that this event was kind of starting with a green field. So we had the luxury of saying, you should start with a CDP and let's build around it. But there are times where you're stuck with legacy kind of software and where data is set and so on. And, making the case for the CDP, it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think, again, if you can kind of show where the value is and there's enough of a pain point that people will start driving towards it. And, Carol kind of mentioning kind of the sales and marketing, there's always that, especially, the success of the CDP, CRM is a huge piece of that. And there's always like, who owns the CRM? Is it the sales team? Is it the marketing team? And who influences that architecture and how that data kind of, is set up? So there it goes, goes back again, like, how can we kind of show them the value of it? I think what's been great with, the evolution of a CDP and is that, you are kind of saying, look, we do need somewhere. That CRM may not be the ideal place for it. The website forms and God knows what isn't the right place for it. So where's that one place that we can all share that data and then get what we need from it, right? So
great. Carol?
I think that's the key. Hazam really mentioned a CDP's value is you buy systems for the best in class of what they do, but those individual systems don't have all the data that you need because it comes in, different channels. So I think that's the value is we all want the 360-degree view. And the only way to do that is to have some sort of system that brings all of these throughputs together into the decision and insights that we need. So that's I don't think you're ever going to find a system that has everything and does it well without a CDP overlay.
Thank you. I just have a couple more quick questions before we open it up for quick Q&A for the essence of time. So we've been hearing about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how cool it is, and some work, some don't, depends how you're using it. So when you think about the mischaracterizations of terms like machine learning and AI, how do you try to focus the discussion on decision-making processes around AI and machine learning? So we have in our firm, for example, we have the CDP, we have a customer journey, and we have this really cool AI and machine learning, which it's kind of like the F-16, right? You can use it. Some people don't need it yet, but they don't know how to use it. But it's there and it's going to matriculate. The more you use it, the smarter you're going to get, right? So, how do you folks view that personally, but also, your thoughts on it, but also maybe a business case either now or in the future or in the past? Because there is a lot of misnomer about it, so a lot of mischaracterizations, and just want to get your thoughts, Carol, on that, and then Hazem.
Yeah, I think that I'm a product lady, so I think about the use case and I think about the value. As a consumer of a CDP in AI and ML, your job is to say, here is my requirement, here's what I need to do. Our job as technology people can say, okay, we'll apply AI and ML. As a business user, you don't go out and ask, I'm going to use AI. You understand what you want to do, and then the technology can do that. The value to a business user of AI and ML is it can help with the expert systems needed. Some of the brain power that correlates data provides an answer. That's what AI and ML do for you. So it gets you faster to your answer without you having to do all of the background. So there's value to it, but as a business user, you say, this is what I want to do, and find solutions that'll let you do that as quickly as you can. And that's how I view AI and ML.
Great. Hazem?
Yeah, no, I mean, Carol is spot on, and it goes back again, what's the use case? What are we trying to kind of solve? People kind of often think of the technology as being kind of the silver bullet, and I put in this like best in class system or whatever, and that's the thing that's gonna like not fix it. And if you go back to like good ML, good AI, it's still with the quality of the data, the kind of data you're putting in, so that you can kind of help drive what that customization looks like. So, if I'm trying to kind of sell a product with a customer and I have no data alignment of past performance or kind of similar metrics of what I'm trying to kind of project for the future, how can this computer give me the advice that I need? And if I'm seeing kind of marketing drive leads, but conversions aren't happening, how's the kind of computer going to be like, well, the sales message isn't right, or the training of this person is like. So in the end of the day, AI and ML and David, I think in your fireside chat kind of touched upon it in terms of kind of the human insight, the human touch is still very much needed. There are things that AI and ML can start crafting as you can give it enough data sets to create maybe content and things like that could be smart. But if you're trying to really understand like what is the right next thing, how do I kind of talk to this segment in a better way, there's still a human touch, knowing the business, knowing the kind of segment you're working with, that like is still priceless, right? So that's how, I think it's still a mixed balance. And some of it depends again on the maturity of the organization. I found that there's some companies that really do it well, but that's like far and few is where a lot of people are facing the same problems. It's like you have Salesforce and Einstein and all the different things we have in our smart CMS systems and things like that, and we're still using a fraction of what we should be using from a ML and perspective and so on, right? So.
Well, thank you. That's very insightful for both of you folks. Just had one last quick question, open up for some Q&A and then wrap it up. So, Carol, if you had one big bold prediction in 2022 outside of the Red Sox winning the World Series, how much? I'm just gonna throw that in there. Just telling you, on data-driven marketing or just in general product marketing, what's going to happen? Where are we going? What's your one big bold prediction that, as Subra did with David, that can come back and haunt you in a year? So let's make it good.
I don't want just one. Let me tell you.
Okay, give me a couple.
No, if we have marketers have been trying to ignore the digital phase of marketing and not ignoring it, I think we can't anymore. We have to embrace it. We have to understand the benefits of it. And I think Gaurav in the earlier part of the webinar was talking about how digital's great, and probably 70 to 80% of your customers' prospects will be looking online, and there's benefits to that. There's also the personal one-to-one touches that we need to now bring together. But anyway, digital now part bigger than it was in 2022. It'll be a bigger part of our pie. We embrace it. It helps us get a wider reach to our customer base and prospects, eyeballs that never saw us before, more cost effective and an ROI, and merge that into the channels that are more one-on-one touches. We need to bring that all together, and a CDP can do that very well. See what I'm doing for you, Steele?
I got you. I got you, Ferrari. I'm buying you a Ferrari. Okay. Hazo? I got you on mute, sir.
I was gonna say, or you're gonna go and race in one in Formula One. So.
Formula One, yes.
So.
With the white dog as my co-pilot.
So spot on. No, I mean, I think very valid. And I mean, another part I think is kind of this, the decline of kind of the spray and pray kind of approach to selling, really, with third-party data kind of coming to some sort of control, and all the privacy measures that are coming on. I think really marketers are having to go back to kind of basics of marketing, like really provide authentic content, listen to kind of customer feedback, focus on who they engage with.
Great.
We have a CDP.
Great. So thank you very much. I don't know if we have any questions before we hand it off back to Subra, but for closing remarks. But if there's anyone that has any questions, please ask them now. Or Jack Harrigy. Jack. Thank you, Jack. Let's see what Jack's question is. Jack, you're on. Jack's question is, with the changes in the third-party rules and laws coming up in 2022, 2023, how do you view that in a general way of affecting marketers on different levels? Meaning the third-party panel, third-party discussion and issues that are happening, removing the third-party abilities, third-party cookies, I think is what he was asking. Thank you, Jack.
I mean, we get to kind of see it from a different, different markets are handling it in different ways. Like, the US, I think, is catching up in ways where, we're living this reality for the last 4 years in Canada, for example, where the opt-in kind of, it's called Castle, but it's basically the anti-spam legislation and things like that were in place, and you have GDPR in Europe and so on. So, I think, you go back to, again, the importance of first-party data, the importance of being able to kind of look at how do you make kind of compelling content that can kind of bring people in and want to give you their information, as again, opposed to just buying mailing lists and 99% of that is garbage. So we're seeing really our customers invest a lot in content generation and exclusive kind of experiences. Let's call it that way.
Personalization. Yep. Yeah. Carol, anything you want to add to that? And
I couldn't have said it any better.
Wonderful.
But yeah, I think that it's it's the logical next extension, because we years ago we were just sending everyone anything and there was no holes barred. Now it's all about putting out content, like Azam said, that is actually meaningful to your the eyeballs you're trying to get to. Imagine that. So putting more effort on the content, putting more effort on knowing who your prospect and customer are, and that's the way it is. So you live with it. You be very careful about, like Kazam said, these lists. The lists never worked anyway. Even when we bought them 10 years ago, there was a lot of garbage on it. People opt out of it. So now we're just putting another layer of legal, but our actions are moving towards the right direction as marketers anyway, because we're providing content personalization to the people that we want to get access to.
Great. So I think we have one other quick question from Subra. Already lowered his hand there. I just want to allow him to ask questions. So we can turn this back over to you and then turn it back over to Subra. So Carol.
Question for Hazem and Carol, actually. So Hazem, you spoke about how in the case of, for example, Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, you had practically an open slate, and you could sort of actually start and say, okay, you can potentially start with a CDP, but quite often that's I'm sure you would agree that's not the case in most enterprises. I mean, they would have some legacy systems, some legacy data, some sort of initiatives already going on, maybe one iteration of marketing that they might have already done and experimented with a bunch of tools. So, I mean, when you walk into an ecosystem like that, and then we speak about maybe data-driven marketing / transformation, how do you sort of help them get started, and where would you say the priority and focus needs to be? This is a question to both of you, actually.
Carol, do you want to take a first stab?
I think it was, how do you get started to know when a CDP is appropriate? Is that the question? I'm sorry, Subra.
Well, more in terms of, let's say you had a bunch of sort of data sources to pick from, and you really want to start working with that, then where do you sort of start focusing? Like, where would you say the initial focus should be, and then sort of progress from there?
I think it largely decides on the business part. If you've got, most organizations can understand where their revenues is a deal closed one. What's the ASP? A CRM generally has that information for the most part. Where you need another layer of the things coming together is when you're trying to understand where that business is coming from, how that business is coming from, what triggered that business to come. That's where you need to peel back the onion and say, where are the disparate information pieces that put that total picture together of that customer journey? And then that's where you can focus the attention on. A standalone CRM, we all can do that. We all get closed won deals. We all can see the lead source. But it's more complicated when you want to understand the journey of that customer across a scalable business. So I think that's where it starts is, okay, what else? What else do we want to know? And it starts up front, like we were talking about before. Know what you want to measure, and then the systems and the structure that you put in place needs to make sure that you're answering that questions.
Yeah. And I think, so knowing what you want to measure, or knowing what, or identifying a business problem can be as like small or as large as we want to make it. So
exactly,
we have customers who are really trying to kind of like boil the ocean and like want to do everything all at once, right? So you're going to have somebody who's going to come and say, I've got 18 different systems. We do like service designs with them and kind of look at like, where did these systems come in and out, and all those kind of things to kind of, outline the customer journey. And, 18 months later, you're still documenting and talking and things like that. So where we found, the more like, it's the quick wins doing, envisioning kind of exercises. We typically will go on like a 12-week engagement and be, find one high value, high impact, high value, but low effort kind of exercise with existing systems. Right. Let's try to kind of show how that could kind of work. And then you make the case for, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if now 2 of these systems kind of talk it and take that next step? And it becomes a natural kind of, within a year, you're kind of talking about the need for a CDP, and everybody's on board,
Great. I think, unless there's any follow-up questions, Subra, I turn it back over to you, sir, to wrap up the session. And I want to thank my panelists. Great job, Carol and Hazem. Thank you so much for participating and providing such great insight. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, Carol, Hazem, thanks a lot. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the event today. I hope all of you can carry away nuggets of insights from the summit that we had today. My big takeaways, from Gaurav's keynote, for example, is, of course, we all know that using data is a strategic imperative, but I think Gaurav's fundamental point is that it's almost a survival imperative, right? And he asked a very powerful question. Do you want to be Sears that had hundreds of millions of customers but ignored data-driven marketing, or do you want to be a Best Buy that actually did it? And the difference today is very stark in terms of how their market cap has evolved in the last few years. So that's the one big takeaway that I had from Gaurav's keynote. From David's session, we spoke to him about his predictions for 2024. Of course, he did get them right. The one big takeaway for me, the broad one, I would say, was that the world that we're headed in to 2022 and beyond will continue to be one that makes incredible progress on data-driven marketing, and that some of the concerns, issues that we're seeing around privacy, while they will continue to be there in the short term, but technology, especially technologies like blockchain, will sort of make it more and more frictionless and more transparent. I think that's a very positive message that we can all take back. Carol and Hazem, of course, had so many insights on how to use data for driving results. I thought it was a fantastic session. The one that stood out, and I think that was a recurring theme all through the summit today, is that I think it's not tool sets and technology that are the problem, as much as probably the ability to bring stakeholders in the organization together in a data-driven culture. So focusing on that and getting that right can be practically half the problem. So yeah, so those were my big takeaways. Thank you all once again for joining. I just want to let everyone know that the session recording will be available on demand pretty soon after the event. So please do watch out the Lemnisk social media channels and website. You should get an email as well if you've registered for the event. We will hold more of these through the rest of this year, heading into March. So watch out for the next 1 or 2 events that we will hold as well. Thank you once again. A very good morning to all of you. Have a great week ahead and stay safe. Thank you.